Had nightmares again. I went out and stood in the freezing rain. It felt okay. On this channel, I don't usually make follow-up videos. When I approach a subject that I want to cover, my goal is to tell a story that is generally self-contained and doesn't require constant updating in the future. In most cases, once I have finished that story, I don't have a huge interest in going back to that subject and continuing to document every controversy or blunder. Quinton Reviews has been one of the few exceptions. In the year or so since I made my first video about him, I found myself periodically checking in on what he's been up to. He's become one of the e-celebs or lolcows that I find entertaining enough to keep up with, and I've been trying to think of a way to cover him again. Luckily, recent events gave me the excuse that I needed to return to the subject of Quinton Reviews. So, welcome to what might become a new series on the channel, Tales from the Quniverse. If you haven't already seen my 90-minute video about Quinton, I'll try to give you the most abridged version of the story that I can, but feel free to check out my first video when you're done with this one. Watching them out of order won't really be an issue. Here goes. A few years ago, Quinton Reviews was a rising YouTuber who quickly gained a substantial following on the platform through a mixture of Channel Awesome style reviews of nostalgic children's media and commentary videos on larger YouTubers like Grade A Under A and Leafy is Here. Initially, Quinton was friends with many edgier YouTubers, particularly members of the YouTube skeptic community. However, in mid-2017, Quinton went through a radical political shift that saw him cut ties with most of the members of his friend group that he perceived to be too edgy or problematic. Over the next year, Quinton became more outspoken about his political beliefs, which increasingly drew criticism from fans as well as other creators like Mahler and Mumkey Jones. This behavior came to a head in November of 2018 when, during a review of The Thinning 2, Quinton went on a bizarre rant about how much he hated Donald Trump. In the aftermath, several smaller commentary channels made videos criticizing Quinton for his polarizing political opinions, as well as his inability to handle the criticism he received for those statements. Quinton didn't take these videos very well, but they paled in comparison to the backlash he would receive only weeks later. After Mumkey Jones was banned from YouTube, Quinton took to Twitter and gloated about the situation. The tweet drew instant and overwhelming criticism before it was deleted by Quinton, who later appeared on the State of the YouTube podcast in an attempt to answer for his various controversies. In the end, he took no responsibility for his actions and doubled down on many of his statements that drew so much criticism in the first place. In the following years, Quinton's channel has largely stagnated as he waffles between half-hearted attempts at BreadTube-style social commentary and his usual fare of mediocre video essays about children's cartoons and internet subcultures. His political posts on Twitter have become increasingly unhinged, and he's still unable to move on from the events of 2018, continuously dragging up his past controversies and frequently whining that other YouTubers hate him. There have been many smaller events and controversies along the way, but now you're mostly up to speed with the major elements of Quinton lore. Cut to January 13th of this year. Video essayist and BreadTube orbiter Sarah Z took to Twitter to voice her frustration with an individual who had been sending her inappropriate direct messages. "This is weird. Please don't do this," the tweet read. Attached was a screenshot of the DM in question. Quote, "Hey, I figure we don't like each other for some reason, so I'm gonna just unfollow." End quote. Shortly afterwards, Sarah Z added additional context to the direct message by saying that it came from another creator who has done things like publicly mention in their videos when Sarah Z hasn't responded to their messages. Adding, quote, "It's weird and uncomfortable, and it puts people in an awkward position," end quote. It was an interesting tweet, but might have amounted to nothing if not for the addition of Joey Chestnut impersonator Lindsay Ellis, who added her own set of inappropriate DMs to the conversation. "I think we may both be on the receiving end of inappropriate messages from the same person," said Ellis. "Please, don't do this." In her reply, Lindsay posted 2 screenshots containing 6 DMs, spanning a period of approximately 6 months from mid-2019 to early 2020. They read as follows. July 11th, 2019. "I'm in town if you're ever free. If not, I totally understand." July 12th, 2019. "Hey, sorry, never mind." September 8th, 2019. "I saw your book finally got announced. I've been hoping to see something about it come out. I feel like it's going to be a massive hit. Enjoy. Smiley face." September 10th, 2019. "Hey, I feel like I accidentally burned this bridge at some point, and if I did, I just want to say, oops." February 1st of 2020. The top half of this DM is cut off, but the bottom reads, "Anyway, yeah, if you want to get dinner or something." I don't really care either way. Then, 3.5 hours later on the same day, the person adds, "As I read this back, I realized how bitchy this message sounds. Sorry, I've just had a really bad trip. Like all my trips, really. I won't bother you anymore after this. Have a good year." In every case, it appeared as though the DMs were sent unsolicited and with no reply from Ellis. Though it is entirely possible that she did reply to the DMs, but simply deleted her side of the conversation for one reason or another. However, that is somewhat irrelevant to what happened next. Within minutes, the followers of Sarah Z and Lindsay Ellis were already speculating about who the culprit could be. Quickly, the field was narrowed down to two prime suspects, the defender of cuties known as Movie Bob, and our boy Quinton. Movie Bob was the front runner due to a previous Twitter altercation with Ellis, who went scorched earth on his ass for being a creep and using a picture of the two of them at a convention several years ago to pretend they were friends. However, the DMs Ellis posted don't read like Movie Bob to me. He is a supplicant to the higher-level left-wing YouTubers, but there was a unique brand of self-pity that immediately screamed Quinton Reviews and big flashing neon lights in my brain. If you followed Quinton for any length of time, you'll probably recognize the pattern of behavior on display here. Quinton's MO is to say something that either brings criticism his way, or that he just regrets saying, which he then deletes. Then, at some later point, he turns himself into a victim and attempts to get attention by being a self-pitying sad sack. And what do you know? At about 4 p.m. on the 13th, Quinton posted 2 tweets. Quote, "I'm feeling really down tonight. I could use some nice messages. To be honest with you, I'm having a mild panic attack. LOL epic. The worst part about this is going to be when it's over, and I just feel cold and alone." End quote. For me, this basically sealed the deal that Quinton was the person being called out. It fits his pattern of behavior to a T. I wasn't the first or only person to notice this, though. At 4:21 p.m., Sarah Z tweeted out a picture of sad, smoking Ben Affleck. Then, in a reply to one of her followers, clarified the meaning by saying, "There's just this brand of self-pitying pushiness that really irks me, where someone behaves inappropriately, gets told they're behaving inappropriately, and then deliberately solicits pity and validation from people who don't have context. It's a bit frustrating." While this was a strong indicator that Quinton was the one sending needy DMs to female YouTubers, it wasn't quite the end of the story. The first set of DMs Ellis posted, dating from around July 11th and July 12th, line up perfectly with VidCon 2019, where Quinton actually attended a panel hosted by Ellis and ContraPoints. Additionally, the DMs from February 1st, asking Lindsay out to dinner, line up with the period where Quinton took an extended trip to Disneyland. The second DM from that screenshot even mentions that the person in question had a bad trip. Of course, this is all circumstantial, but there is one final piece of information worth going over. In both Sarah Z and Lindsay Ellis' screenshots, they failed to completely censor out the profile picture of the person sending the DM. The screenshots posted by Ellis contain 2 poorly covered up profile pictures, revealing 2 slivers of the original image. While this seems like nothing at first glance, when compared to Quinton's profile picture, there are noticeable similarities. They only become more obvious when you overlay the images in Photoshop, and the visible pixels in the poorly censored images correspond perfectly with the landmarks in Quinton's profile picture. Sarah Z's screenshot is a bit harder to make out, but an amateur forensic photographic analyst on my Twitter did a pretty compelling comparison that matches up with Quinton's profile extremely well. This has led some people to believe that the improper cover-ups weren't entirely accidental. Although I'm skeptical of the motivations of Sarah Z and Lindsay Ellis for leaking their DMs in a way that included obvious breadcrumbs, I don't think they would be malicious enough to let people falsely assume that Quinton was the one who was sending them inappropriate DMs if he was innocent. Whether or not Quinton sent the DMs, it should be alarming to him that so many people automatically assumed he did. This should be a moment of self-reflection where Quinton recognizes that his behavior is completely transparent and that his self-pitying dopamine fishing has worn thin with everyone but his most diehard sycophantic ass-lickers. But I doubt he will. Part of what makes Quinton such a fascinating case study to me is his utter inability to take responsibility for his own actions so that he can move on with his life. Instead, he dwells on the past until he is able to retcon the story in his own mind in a way that turns him into the victim or a tragic hero. You can see the mental gymnastics play out in the way he has tried to rewrite history over the controversies of 2017 and 2018. In the past, he said his journey to becoming a leftist started when he saw a bunch of anti-SJWs who looked like him, which caused him to realize that he had bought into an ideology that made him think he was the victim. This statement has been directly contradicted by several people who were friends with Quinton at the time and claim that his motivation for cutting ties with other YouTubers was to protect his public image. As more time passes and the threads of context for those events becomes thinner and thinner, Quinton continues to change the story and embellish it with more details, to the point that in more recent retellings he claims that he cut ties with other YouTubers when they blew off his request for emotional support after he was harassed by a hate mob and had a mental breakdown. His attempts to rewrite history have also been called out by many members of the skeptic community, like Some Black Guy and Mundane Matt. Imagine being so low on the totem pole that even the Boulder King can put you in your place. More pathetically, he's still hung up on the events of 2018 to such a degree that any time YouTube drama comes up on Twitter, Quinton can't resist turning it into a pity party about himself, as was the case with the recent controversy surrounding Call Me Carson. Quote, "Whenever I see YouTubers get massively defended because they allegedly committed a crime, it makes me annoyed because I got canceled for doing absolutely nothing and no one came to bat for me, lol. For those who want to know, I said that I don't like Trump or Ben Shapiro. Then I was mean to a guy who cheated on his girlfriend with a child rapist. Me being mean to that guy was bigger drama than him aiding and abetting a child rapist. That's YouTube drama for you." End quote. Now, there is so much wrong with that handful of sentences that it's hard to even know where to begin. But I'll try. For one, Quinton was never cancelled. He made a bunch of dumb, polarizing, and contrarian statements about people like PewDiePie and Ben Shapiro, which only resulted in a handful of much smaller channels, who Quinton referred to as guppies, making videos calling him out for being an idiot with bad takes. As far as Trump goes, Quinton shoehorned an Orange Man bad level opinion that nobody wanted or asked for into a review of a Logan Paul movie.
So, here's the thing. I fucking hate Trump.
Most people found it cringy, forced, and completely pointless. But they didn't hate Quinton for it or cancel him in any way beyond making fun of him in the comment section. With Shapiro, Quinton said that PewDiePie shouldn't humanize Tiny Ben because he's transphobic and racist, and then completely whiffed when people asked him to provide any evidence. Where he really goes off the rails is when he talks about Mumkey Jones, and tries to spin his minor run-in with a few commentary channels as being bigger than the Category 5 shitacane that blew up around Mumkey and his girlfriend. Aside from the fact that the Mumkey drama happened months after Quinton's own situation, it was a much bigger dumpster fire. Just for some perspective, Mumkey's Kiwi Farms thread gained more pages in 3 months than Quinton's has in 3 years. Unlike Quinton, Mumkey's reputation and life have been greatly tarnished in the process, for obvious reasons. I know some people don't understand my fascination with Quinton. He's not the typical lolcow. He's not a criminal or even really a bad person per se. But there is something so compelling about a guy who is unable to simply admit that he was wrong 2 years ago and move on with his life. Instead, he's literally created his own fantasy world to live in where he was the victim. Because that way he never has to learn from his past mistakes and make better decisions in the future. Here is a tweet from a few days after the Capitol Hill riots, where Quinton is celebrating seeing all the people who canceled him for hating Trump being kicked off Twitter. It's almost exactly the same kind of smug, gloating tweet that he posted after Mumkey was banned from YouTube. So in 3 years he's learned absolutely nothing about what caused that entire controversy. He's just alienated any fans who might call him out in his behavior, and replaced him with individuals who are willing to give him unwavering attention and validation. As I was trying to wrap this script up, a fairly lengthy log of Quinton's Discord conversations was leaked. I think they provide an interesting insight into his side of the DM controversy, as well as a very telling perspective on Quinton's personality as a whole. I won't bore you with every one of these hundreds of posts, but there are some worth noting. First of all, Quinton does acknowledge that he sent the DMs leaked by Sarah Z and Lindsay Ellis. In an interesting twist, he also states that he has private information that he could leak that would prove that she's a hypocrite, but he doesn't out of human goodness. In this context, I'm not entirely sure who he means by she, but I lean towards Ellis, as he specifically mentions being doxxed by a YouTuber with 1 million subs, who tried to embarrass him and pretend he was the bad guy. Quinton also believes that they crossed a line by posting the DMs, and that Ellis used them to virtue signal to her fans. Something that made Quinton worry that he would become the new movie Bob, as people have turned on everyone else that Ellis has exposed. Reading through these logs, I almost root for Quinton at times. Fuck him up, Q. Release the receipts. Turn this into some real drama like you said you could. I think the fact that Quinton was even willing to bitch about Ellis in his Fallout bunker of a Discord server puts him one notch above movie Bob. However, he still appears unwilling to publicly confront Ellis and Sarah Z for their betrayal. Overall, it seems that Quinton has largely moved on from BreadTube, as he stated that he knew they didn't like him from the time he was invited onto a charity stream and everyone treated him like dicks. Apparently, that entire clique is a no-go. By the end of the logs, Quinton is wishing that he could find a new group of cool kids because he's failed and there is nothing he can do. That being said, the commentary on the DM scandal is really only part of what I find interesting about these logs. I opened the video with the quote about standing in the freezing rain because I think it perfectly encapsulates the emo atmosphere permeating Cue Ball's Discord. The best way to describe it is pathetic. Quinton has one of the most unhealthy parasocial relationships with his fanbase that I've ever seen, and his Discord is a perfect example. It's little more than a safe space that Quinton retreats into when he's feeling down and needs support. This can be about anything from Quinton's weight to bitching about Mumkey Jones. Still, over 2 years later. At one point, he actually tells his Discord that he's feeling cold and needs a pick-me-up. More broadly, the conversation is almost entirely one-sided. To use a term from Opie and Anthony, anything that isn't outright support or praise for Quinton is put on the pay no mind list. Quinton shows up, he blabbers about himself and fishes for nice comments. Anything that doesn't fit the bill is ignored, while Quinton finds another way to make the conversation about himself. Out of hundreds upon hundreds of messages shared between Quinton and his inner circle, I can't recall seeing a single comment that disagreed with him, much less was even mildly critical. It's a complete echo chamber of pro-Quinton propaganda, even more so than his Twitter account. Circling back to the DMs for a moment, it's easy to interpret Quinton's behavior as creepy or predatory, but as pathetic and clingy as Q's comments appear to be, they come across more as a guy seeking some kind of connection with the creators he views as peers and personal heroes. Something Quinton desperately seems to want based upon his constant whining about being betrayed and abandoned by other YouTubers. However, the case of Quinton's relationship with his fanbase is different. Predatory might be a strong word, but I think it is unhealthy and inappropriate. There is a huge power imbalance at play here. The Discord server is only for Quinton's Patreon supporters. This is pretty standard procedure for a lot of creators, but it's a process that inherently whittles down the community you're engaging with to only your most hardcore fans. Reading through the Discord logs, it becomes apparent that it's not a place for vigorous discussion or debate. Rather, it's simply a hug box, and if you don't intend to feed into Quinton's perpetual victim complex, you aren't really welcome. Like so many other eccentric individuals on the internet, Quinton is incapable of accepting criticism of any kind. Perhaps unintentionally, he has made his delusions worse by surrounding himself with nothing but hardcore fans who shower him with emotional support, thus creating a feedback loop, wherein Quinton has become so dependent on the comfort and reassurance of his fanbase that he has no emotional defense mechanisms, other than running back to the safe space of his Discord server and begging for more attention. It's not unlike the vicious cycle that develops when somebody is addicted to laxatives. Over time, it becomes harder and harder for them to shit without using laxatives, until eventually they lose the ability altogether. This is the stage Quinton is at with his fans. He's unable to function without constant positive reinforcement. For the most part, Quinton has refrained from crossing over into the territory of a full-blown lolcow. He's good for a spectacle every 2 to 3 months, but he isn't a Movie Bob or a Tony Goldmark. He's not completely unhinged. Yet. As he spirals deeper and deeper into this delusional fantasy world, fueled by self-pity and constant attention from his fans, it's only a matter of time before he loses touch with reality and crosses that line. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. I know that there is a lot of entertaining Quinton lore from the past year that I didn't cover. The VoidCon video, the ridiculous saga of the Garfield Eats plushie, and many more shenanigans come to mind. But for this video, I just wanted to cover the events surrounding the recent DM controversy, as well as the Discord leaks, and how it relates to the overall profile of Quinton that makes him such an amusing e-celeb in my opinion. Maybe in the future I'll revisit this topic and go over all of the noteworthy events that have occurred since my first Quinton video. So for the time being, consider this a Quinton Reviews 1.5 documentary. If you want to support the channel, check out my Twitter and Patreon, and a big thank you to my supporters on Patreon who help make these videos possible. Thank you. Erica Hughes, Dan Thomas, Milad, Ryan Cedor, Mike Roballs, Zelda Z, Dirtbag Thor, James Taylor, Bone CK, Fightback CBD, Mechanical Junkie, Raghav Verma, The Son of Man, Neem, Jambi Helmick, Kevin Howard, CR Guitar, and Jackie.